Welcome to the EXCELcast. I'm Jonathan Kuskiski, Assistant Director for the EXCEL program here at the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance. And today we have a special episode on teaching artistry with some very special guests. First of all, welcome Jim Leija. How are you?
Hi, thanks. I'm great.
Great to have you here in the studio. Jim is the Director of Education and Community Engagement at University Musical Society. And for the first time, we have two virtual guests joining us from New York City. So please welcome them. Hilary, Easton, and Richard Mannoia. How are you? It's great to have you both.
Great.
Hello.
Good to be here.
So just as a quick introduction, Hilary is a master teacher, choreographer, member of the dance faculty at the Juilliard School, and an educational consultant for the New York Philharmonic Education Department. Richard is a New York City-based clarinetist with extensive interdisciplinary performing experience and a New York Philharmonic teaching artist. So it's a real pleasure to have you both. We want to just sort of jump right into this conversation about teaching artistry. So, what if you were to define teaching artistry for our audience, which is primarily students, many of whom may have never heard the term or been sort of exposed to it? How would you describe it to them?
Should I start?
Sure.
All right. So a teaching artist is an artist who shares his or her artistic capacities, their career, their work with the community, really, in a lot of different ways. I mean, there's so many different types of teaching artists, and we will talk about that for sure. But in general, a teaching artist is someone who works either in schools, with educators, with various differing populations, like perhaps senior centers or hospitals, or there's a real range. But generally, it's using your artistic work to engage the community in some way. Want to add to that?
Yeah, that's well said. It's someone who's working as a performing artist and also as a teacher engager, as Hilary was mentioning. In lots of different settings, and generally it's not full-time. And so teaching artists are balancing these two parts of their career, the community or educational engagement and performing.
So how would you say that teaching artistry looks different from music education or instructional education of music?
I mean, sometimes there's crossover.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are, like an example I can think of off the top of my head is, even the Very Young Composers Project that we have here at the Philharmonic, the students are learning about using composition. They're making compositions for the orchestra at
mm-hmm.
times, so there are composers that are working with them on very sort of technical things, but it's also in the school's work. Or another example is there's an organization in Rhode Island called Community Music
mm-hmm.
Works, where they have a storefront. They teach lessons, music lessons to the neighboring kids, and then they also create performances for them and are finding a way to sort of integrate more straightforward music education like that with community work.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a range like that too, but generally, or at least in our work, I would say, we're looking at works of art. We're thinking, so what is this amazing piece of music that's being performed by the Philharmonic, and how can we make connections about that music for students in schools,
mm-hmm.
so that teaching artists work with students in schools to prepare them to hear Sibelius or this year Dvorak. Or, masterworks. And it brings together a lot of different aspects of a teaching artist's love and interest in the work, as well as just doing so much for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's really getting into the sort of the brand or the methodology of our work here at the New York Philharmonic, which is to connect people, little people and big people, with great works of art.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily to teach them how to perform it. So it does, your audience, your group of seniors, your kids in a fifth grade classroom may not play instruments. So you're not teaching them how to play Dvorak or anything from there, but you're leading through them through experiential activities to get sort of an insider's view of what it's like to understand, to listen to work through the same issues that the composer did.
Mm-hmm. I think you make a really good point too, Richard, which I think maybe sometimes when people think about teaching artistry work, they think almost entirely of kids. But as you guys are both highlighting, like there is a full spectrum of participants in this kind of work. So from kids to adults, and I wonder too how Hilary, you're a dancer and a choreographer. Richard, you're a clarinetist, a musician. You freelance. You've played with new music groups. How did you each come to the idea of being a teaching artist? What was your path?
Do you want to start?
Sure. Well, it came to me without knowing that it even existed.
Okay.
So all you folks listening in who are going to attend the workshops, you're way ahead of the game because you're aware that this stuff exists. And it's also such a widely growing field. I mean, in 20 years later, it's just it expanded, become more professional, become just working on a grander scale worldwide. So for me, I came to it because the New York Philharmonic was expanding their own program. They piloted it in 1994, and a few years later they were ready to expand. And so they needed teaching artists. So they reached out to the conservatories in New York City, and they asked them for some recommendations of graduates who might be interested and capable of the work. So fortunately, I was nominated and then auditioned here at the Philharmonic and got the gig and sort of fell in love with it from there. Really, it changed my life because while I love performing, reaching out to new audiences in new ways and working with kids and people in hospitals, in prisons, etc., became a different way of connecting and also giving back, which performing alone didn't do. So that became to really nourish me artistically and professionally, and it also made me feel like I was part of a bigger conversation and a bigger solution in terms of how does classical music for me and how do the arts exist and remain relevant or become more relevant in the 21st century. Lots of people complain about the troubles that we have, and to me, being a teaching artist was part of that solution. So that was sort of how I got into it and stuck with it.
That's so great. That's so great because I think some of the students are probably asking themselves that same question. Yes. Like, we're doing this work, we love it so much. How do we keep it relevant? How do we keep it alive? How do we make sure it reaches a lot of people? And it's really wonderful that you see that connection in your own practice and maybe see it for others too. Hilary, what about you?
Yeah, actually similar but different. I, as a younger dancer, choreographer, I was working with a lot of choreographers that were teaching artists at Lincoln Center Institute. It's now Lincoln Center Education. And I kept hearing about it, and occasionally I would get called in to demonstrate for projects at Lincoln Center Institute. And so I interviewed and again got the gig, and I found that the work, as I was thinking as a choreographer about these amazing dance works of art that I was teaching to, as we say, I found that I was understanding them better, and from understanding that better, it was changing my own work. I was starting to rethink my own choreography based on the sort of in-depth approach I was taking to these masterworks of art. And then, yes, I had the same experience where I felt like the kind of group that I was performing for before I became a teaching artist was a much more narrow compendium of humans. And that once I became a teaching artist, I found I was giving back in a much more gratifying way. I wasn't just in that ivory tower. I was communicating with lots of different types of people, and I mean, we all care so much about the arts, right? We have had experiences with the arts that make us know how essential they are. But that's not true for so much of the population of the world. And it's only through education. It's only through this kind of reaching out to others that we're going to be able to extend our own work. So there's, I think, things about it that are mercenary, and there are things about it that are humanitarian. There's like a big mix, I think, about why we feel so attached to the work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think for our students, we see this work as an amazing sort of opportunity. Many of the students that we work with here at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, are not familiar with teaching artistry unless they've lived in a place where they have been either they have worked with teaching artists or they know people who have become teaching artists. And that's one of the reasons we're having this conversation, and also one of the reasons that we're having this larger collaboration to create this course for the winter term of 2017 on teaching artistry. And so, sort of as a segue into that, I'm curious. What would you say? So we've got some sort of clear ideas of the value of teaching artistry and how it can empower you not only to make to enrich your life as an artist, but also to make a greater impact and make your art more relevant in some ways to different communities. So what are some of the sort of core, basic, foundational skills that a newcomer to teaching artistry might expect from that course, and even if they don't take the course, the kinds of first steps they should take to become, to develop the skills that they would need to become a teaching artist?
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest things that people take away is strategies on how to look at a piece of art, right? Whether it's a sculpture, if they're a visual artist, or a piece of music for a musician, and figure out how to unpack and open that piece up and design strategies and experiences for other people to enter into engagement with that piece, right? So it might be figuring out some rhythms to teach from the piece, or it might be exploring a more aesthetic profile like contrast or something, and creating activities again, for little people, for big people, to explore that piece in their own way. So it won't be about lecturing, right? And we're not going to do a lot of lecturing, but that's I'd say one of the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, so that's something that your students should know, that they will be up and moving and trying and experimenting and making choices, that we won't be in the front of the room doing a whole lot of talking, that we'll be creating opportunities for them to try out different aspects of understanding a work of art, and then unpacking what those strategies were that we use, that they can use them themselves, trying them out themselves. So there will be like a feedback loop between having educational experiences led by us to them reflecting on those ideas and trying them themselves, and us reflecting on that. So that they should just know it's going to be quite active and exploratory and super fun.
Good.
Great. I'm curious as well, when you think about sort of an intensive, you mentioned already that the interactivity of it is core. What about sort of, so obviously that, I think that makes sense. They're going to get up and sort of work through some of these exercises and develop those skills. What else about the sort of art aesthetic underpinnings of this work are you going to explore, and what can they expect in terms of learning a little bit about the origins and the background of the work?
Well, I think we both, and certainly the organization here at the Philharmonic, has been very influenced by the work of John Dewey, the educational philosopher, and also Maxine Green, another educational philosopher that we know and love. And really, one of the most essential ideas is one of transaction between work of art and viewer, so that we're going to be asking your students to really bring themselves, their own lived lives, to any work of art that we're exploring. And it's really about that place in the middle, that where the work of art and the viewer meet together. We won't be telling them the history of, how the Brandenburg concertos were created. We will be exploring certain aspects of compositional tools and strategies and thinking about, what I know about those things and how they come together. So that idea that there's multiple ways in, between the four of us, we would each understand a work of art completely differently, and that it is that conversation, that dialogue that really affects how we understand it, and again, creates a community experience within a work of art. I think that's something that we will certainly be discussing and stressing, and one always feels a great sense of revelation when thinking about that idea. That's sort of endlessly interesting, that idea of the multiple viewpoints. Add anything?
Yeah, and I'd just say that we'd also be sharing with them the strategies and pedagogy that's developed here at New York Philharmonic over the past 22 years since the faculty was first formed. So we have a lot of very practical skills and strategies that we developed, particularly for music. But again, there will also be lots, particularly through Hilary, of looking outside of music into the other art forms for all of our dancer and theater folks.
Awesome. It sounds like a great opportunity, actually, for students to be really creative about how they think about what they do and experience the art forms that they're makers of. And it also, I love that you both keep talking about strategies and pedagogies, which, if people are not familiar with the term pedagogy, it means ways of teaching, essentially, or philosophies of teaching, right? That there are actually ways to support students who have a lot of enthusiasm or excitement about communicating about their work with other people, but just don't necessarily know how to do it yet. So there's this chance to say, okay, I'm really excited. I want to make my audience bigger. I want to maybe think about how I can be more relevant. And there's actually this whole body of knowledge and strategies and activities that you're going to share during the workshop to really help support and boost that ability.
Yeah, I think that's really true. It'll be both philosophical, but also quite practical.
Good.
That's great. And it's great to hear that for our students, regardless of whether they're thinking they're going to move to New York and become a teaching artist or not, that they're going to get something, they're going to get an experience here that's going to empower them over sort of not only different ways of communicating and understanding the artwork that they're passionate about, but actually understanding how to connect that to different communities, right? Regardless of how whatever the modality of that work is. So that's really exciting for us, and we're so thankful to have the opportunity to have you both come to campus and to collaborate with UMS to make that happen. So it's been great to talk with you both today, and thank you so much for this conversation and for the chance to collaborate next semester.
Thank you.
It'll be great to see you. Next time we'll be up on our feet and we'll have you there doing just the same.
Exactly.
That sounds great. All right. Well, thanks so much.